This is Francisco from VCS Software. Thank you for registering for this morning's class, which is the last basic setup class titled User Setup and Security Configuration. And during the course of this class, we're going to learn how to create user logins for all of your employees, during which time we're also going to assign all of your employees to security profiles. Now, a security profile is what will control what someone can see or what they can do within the scheduling application. Now, the application already comes with pre-configured security profiles, and these profiles were designed with best practices in mind. In other words, given our experience with the system and how the vast majority of our community uses the application, we have already figured out what your typical basic user is going to need to do within the application, what a supervisor is going to have to do. And so you will absolutely have the opportunity to reconfigure security to better fit your department's needs. However, at this stage, we would recommend that you use our pre-built security profiles. And then you can move on to training. You can start seeing how these functions work. And once you have gained a certain level of comfort with the system, at that point you can then reevaluate what your security needs are going to be if you want to restrict access to a particular function, or you want to restrict a user or a group of users from seeing another type of schedule within the application. You will absolutely be able to do that. Now, if you have been attending these online classes in order of the catalog number, in other words, you just went from class Basic Setup 1 right to this one, Basic Setup 7. After completion of this class, you'll be able to start signing up for our basic training classes, as well as the advanced setup and training classes. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that before we move any further. And I'd like to just show you the registration page for the basic training classes. Here we go. So along with the link that you received, which gave you access to the basic setup catalog, you should also have a link to basic training classes. And they're organized beginning with basic training 8. So basically what happens is you're moving from basic setup 7 into your basic training classes, but we continue with the numbering here. So in class 8, that is basic user training, scheduling for basic users. During this class, attendees will learn how to log on to our web application, which is normally the interface most of your basic users will need. And we're going to show attendees how to view schedules, how to request time off, request overtime. If, for example, someone works at the end of their shift by a few hours and they need to submit a request for payment for those additional hours worked. We'll talk about how to submit those. We'll also talk about how to sign up for extra duty opportunities or any overtime that may have been posted, similar to like a virtual sign-up sheet. So that would be taught under the basic user training class. Now that is a great class not only for the basic users, but supervisors and administrators as well. So those functions that I just mentioned are probably functions that almost everyone within your department is going to need to know. If they cannot attend a live class, of course we have recorded classes available. The next class in the catalog is Supervisor Training, Scheduling for Supervisors. That's also web-based. So again, we're assuming that your supervisors are going to log on to the application's web portal. And not only will supervisors be able to perform all of the functions I just mentioned, but of course they might need to be able to approve time off, approve overtime. They might need to make minor scheduling changes. So those topics would be covered under the supervisor training class. We also offer 2 administrative classes. And for the administrative classes, we are, in a sense, revisiting topics that were already covered during your basic setup classes. So using class number 10 here as an example, administrative training, managing employees. In this class, what we do is we instruct attendees how to add new employee profiles. Now, by this stage, all of your employees have probably been entered into the system already. That is a topic covered under the very first basic setup class. But we offer this class in the event that you have another administrative user within your department who may have not been part of the setup of the system. So this would be a great class for someone who's maybe new to the system but who's going to come into it with some administrative tasks like entering a brand new employee, promoting an employee. And the last administrative class is administrative training, creating and assigning schedules. So once again, we're talking about a topic that was already covered during your basic setup. But if you did have someone who was not involved in the setup of the system, but they will be responsible for creating schedules or assigning personnel to schedules, this would be a great class. And also serves as a refresher for yourself. Now, our recommendation would be to, at the very least, attend the class number 8 and 9, even if you haven't gone through your advanced setup and training classes yet. Okay? Because it's going to give you a little context for, how the application is going to work, how time off and overtime will be posted on the schedule, and that knowledge will become useful later on when you start looking at some of the advanced setup and training classes. Now, these classes are given multiple times every month, so you are free to sign up for as many of these as you feel you might need to. And again, each session is recorded, so if you have personnel who's unable to attend the live sessions, you can certainly provide them with access to the videos that are recorded. Now let's take a look at the advanced setup and training classes, which is the third link that you received. And within this catalog, you're going to be able to learn how to set up the rules for how your department accrues time off. If your department utilizes holiday pay, you'll learn how to set up those rules as well. We also have classes on setting up what we call replacement policies, which are rule sets used to create call lists for filling overtime. We have classes for our extra duty module that will allow you to set up and start using the add-on module to create and assign extra duty work. And you may choose to start signing up for these right away, nothing wrong with that. But again, I would recommend perhaps taking a look at the basic user and supervisor training classes before you do so. Okay. These classes are also given multiple times, and you're free to sign up for them as many times as you feel you might need. Okay, so that's just a brief note about how to proceed after today's class. For today's focus, though, we're going to talk about just creating the logins for our users, assigning them to the security profiles. And we're about ready to begin. And before we do that, just very briefly, because we have a small group today, are there any questions about signing up for the classes, whether it's the training or the advanced setup, before we move on to our user setup? Okay, let's get started then. Using our desktop application, we're going to select from our administration menu, under the category Security, the only screen within that category called Security Designer. From this screen, you'll notice over on the left, you have several security profiles. Each security profile has already been configured. Now, those who have built the system and who will remain the system administrators will belong to the Administrator Security Profile. This security profile has been configured to allow you access to all employees and all functions available within the schedule application. And that includes both the desktop application as well as the web application. Your largest user base within the department will fall under the basic user category. The basic user security profile has been pre-configured to allow access only to our web portal, with the understanding that the desktop application that you built the system through is designed primarily for administrators. So most of your basic users will probably never know that there is a desktop version of this program. Basic users have access to every schedule view offered within the web application. They will be able to see schedules in daily, weekly, and monthly formats, not only for themselves, but for the rest of the department. Basic users will only be able to make requests. They can request time off. They can request overtime for additional hours worked. They can punch in and out if that's a function you choose to adopt for your department. They can sign up for additional work such as extra duty jobs or department overtime if you choose to post those jobs online in the first place. Your next largest group will fall under the Supervisor Security Profile. Supervisors will have the same functionality available to basic users, but they will also have the ability to approve time off, approve overtime. They will be able to modify those entries, and they will be able to make minor schedule changes. Supervisors will also be able to place any employee on time off or overtime manually. In other words, if someone calls out sick, a supervisor should be able to post that directly onto the schedule on that employee's behalf. This Supervisor Security Profile allows all supervisors access to all employees' schedules, time off, and overtime requests. In other words, in a police-based schedule, if I am a sergeant of Squad A, I should still have supervisory privileges over the other squads. Although I may not exercise those privileges every day, we might need access to those employees. Now, we have several variations of the Supervisor Security Profiles. We have one called Supervisor Group, which allows for all of the functionality I just mentioned, but restricts the supervisor to only operating those functions for employees within their own group, department, or squad. In other words, if you have a supervisor who just oversees one specific department and they will not have to see or perform any scheduling functions for anyone outside of that department, you can choose to assign them to the Supervisor Group profile. The next variation on the Supervisor profile is our Supervisor Extra Duty option. This one is almost identical to the first Supervisor profile we looked at. It allows the supervisor all supervisory functions for the entire department with the addition of extra duty. So if you have a supervisor who is also in charge of creating extra duty jobs or assigning extra duty jobs, or maybe all of your supervisors may have that privilege, assign them to Supervisor Extra Duty. And the last one, Supervisor Training, allows any supervisor access to the training and certification module. If that supervisor needs to be able to create training assignments, assign employees to those training assignments, assign them to that profile. Now, each security profile can be reconfigured. It can be modified to better fit your department's needs, as I mentioned earlier. If the basic user profile offers certain screens or functions that you do not plan on adopting for your department, you can choose to remove them. But again, I would wait to go through the training classes first, because the training classes that I mentioned before are all based on these security profiles. So every screen that's accounted for here will be covered during the online class. And at that point, if you choose to remove something, there is an advanced setup class for reconfiguring your security needs. We're going to close out of the Security Designer. And we're going to move over to the Employee Center to a screen called Mass Auto Create Users. Within this screen, we're going to create logins for groups of employees at once. During this process, we're also going to establish who has access to the various functions by assigning them to the security profiles we just talked about. Now, our recommendation here is to create logins for your basic users and your supervisors and administrators separately. And to do that, click on Select Employees at the very top. And from your list of employees, which I only have 37 in my department, I am just going to pick those that should fall under the basic user category. Over to the right, it might be easier to do this by title, so I'll use my filter options to choose title, and I'm just going to choose everyone who's going to be a basic user. Now, that would be, in my case, officers, school resource officers, and detectives. Everyone else on this list might fall under the supervisor category or administrator category. After I've selected the titles that I want to work with, I'll click Select and Close. And once it filters your results, you can manually highlight the people you want to create logins for, or you can select all. So I'm just going to work with this small group here. When I click on Select and Close, it's going to show me their names listed below. And one employee I have is labeled in green, which means they already have a username. That's okay. For everyone else, we're going to use this section to create the actual login. Now, you can choose to use their email addresses. That works well. If you use the email address, click on Apply Format above. You'll see the emails listed below. Now, you don't have to choose emails. Emails works well because it is unique. It's guaranteed to be unique. And it would actually be easier for them to log on to the web portal with that. If you create some other type of username, like first initial, last name, when they log on to the web portal, they're going to have to enter a site code, which helps our system determine what department they belong to. But if that is your choice, I will hold down my control button while I highlight these three entries, and I'll clear my selected cells so I can use one of these other options. So we talked about maybe using first initial, last name as the login. That's fine. Under Options, enter the amount of letters of the first name, the amount of letters of the last name, or you can use a combination of the checkboxes. And click on Apply Format. This is going to show you what that login is going to look like. Now, you have additional options such as the ability to insert the employee code, the payroll ID, or the badge number before or after any other value here. So if I was to select badge numbers, I can say apply that after the last name. Let's apply that format if there is any badge numbers, which I may not have. Okay, I don't have any. Or you can choose some other character. Okay. So for this example, I will just continue using first initial, last name. And we're going to move on to the user profile section. What you'll need to do here is you'll need to select what security profile this group belongs to. These folks will be my basic users. Over on the right, under Web Dashboard, you're going to choose which is the default web dashboard these employees will see when they log in. Now, these web dashboards were created during the fourth online class. So depending on how many you built, choose the one that best fits for this group of employees. Now, this particular group will not have access to our desktop application. And that's what the default tile profile is referring to. It is showing you a list of the desktop dashboards you created also in the fourth online class. In the section below, number of past days to allow update will determine how many days back can an employee log onto the system and enter a time off or overtime entry. In other words, if I worked overtime today at the end of my shift, how many days do I have to enter the application and put that request for payment in? For some of you, it might be a week, 2 weeks. I like to use 14 days as a standard. We're about ready to save this, so let's click on the Save button up top. It's going to say this person already has a username. That's fine. We won't create a new one. There's no need to. But when we click on the OK button, it will create the other two for us. Now, the system is going to pick a password for that employee. The password will be first initial, last name, and there is an 8-character limit on that last name. So for these two employees, it's a non-issue. Brian Gibbons would log on with B. Gibbons. This would be B. Jordan. Okay. Those are the passwords. Now, those are temporary, and basic users will have the ability to change that password the first time they log on to the system. So a question came through with regards to the default tile profile. Now, I have 5 options here. It's not reflective of what you have in your system. It depends on how many tile profiles you created. And in most cases, it's probably just one. Unless you are a very large department, you probably just created one. So if the group you're creating logins for will have access to the desktop application, make sure you select the default tile profile from the list. Now, under Class 4, you also learn how to create the web dashboard. So once again, it all comes down to how many you may have created. I doubt you probably need more than one profile for either the web or the desktop version, but a lot of that, again, will depend on the size of your department. So you're going to repeat this process until you've created logins for everyone within the department. So let's just do this again. Let's go back to Select Employees. And this time, I'm going to choose sergeants, lieutenants, and captains. And I'll say this makes up my supervisory group. Let's click on Select and Close. Actually, maybe I'll just choose them this way. That works as well. So now with this group, I'm still going to use the same login setup. So you'll notice that it keeps the settings from the last time I used this, so I should not have to make any adjustments here. In the section below, I'm going to assign them to the security profile. I'll use Supervisor for this group. And over on the right, again, I'm going to assign them a web dashboard and a desktop dashboard only if they're going to access the desktop version. Now, under number of past days to allow update, I might allow these guys to go a little further back on the schedule because these guys might have to modify time off and overtime entries. So they might need to go back a little further than 14 days, possibly. Let's click on Apply Format. There's our usernames. And now we click on the Save button. So 5 more user profiles have been created. Let's close out of that screen. And under the Employee Center, we're going to take a look at the last screen for this morning called User Profile. So these are the logins that we created en masse. This screen is going to be useful when you need to change someone's security profile individually, or maybe you have a new hire. You're not going to go through the mass auto create step if you're just adding a new employee. Within this screen, you highlight the name of the person you need to make a change to. Bob might be an officer, but he might be helping us with certain functions within the program, so he might actually be a supervisor as far as the program is concerned. And we can even change how many days back he can go into the system. Up top, you have a tab for web settings, so if you needed to change his default web page, you can do that as well. And if you make any changes, just be sure to click on the Save button. Now you'll notice over to the right, at the very bottom, there's a checkbox marked Force User to Change Password on Next Web Login. That means the first time these folks log on to the web portal, they will be asked to change their password. Once they do so, the password will not expire, but they can change it anytime they wish. Now, when you get started with the system, it's possible people will be entering the wrong passwords after a few failed attempts to log on to the system. They will be locked out, and they might come to you to let you know this. In order to fix that, just enter this screen, click on the name of the person who was locked out, and you'll notice that this checkbox is marked, Web Account Locked. Just unmark it, and for good measure, maybe give them a new password, something simple like 1234, so that they can log on and reset their password. And again, after you make these changes, just be sure to click on the Save button up top. Now, the last tip I have for the usernames is, if you look under the code, this is going to be the actual login that they're going to use. Make sure that they're entering it exactly as it would be listed here. So notice the first and last initials are capitalized. Make sure that's how they put it in. Okay, it is case sensitive. Of course, if you're using things like badge numbers, obviously it's a non-issue. And if you feel that might be a little confusing for some folks to log in, you may want to consider using something else. Like I said, a badge number, email address, something like that might be a little easier for your department. Now, I'd like to just show you the login screen for the program. So if you use emails, you would potentially save yourself from having to enter your department's site code. So I always like the email better for that purpose. Now, the web portal will be discussed in far greater detail during the basic user class and supervisor classes. But with regards to creating logins, assigning people to security profiles, are there any questions about what we've talked about this morning? Okay. So a question came through with regards to forcing users to change password. That's actually done by default. So you wouldn't have to mark that. We make that assumption that pretty much everybody should be logging on to the web portal and changing their password first before they do anything. Now, as with all basic setup classes, just a reminder that there is a training aid available with screenshots and instructions for everything that we've covered this morning. And you should have received that when you registered for the class. You will also have access to the document again after the class ends, and you receive the link to today's video. Now, there is a section under the Go To Training Control Panel. It's a section called Materials. If you were to click on the button right next to where it says Materials, you have access to download the file directly. So if you click on the file labeled Basic Setup 7 Guide PDF, it will allow you to save it on any location on your desktop computer. And again, it's just covering everything that we talked about this morning. And that document, you will see it again on the email follow-up that we send you. All right, folks, is there any other questions before we close out this morning's class? Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time this morning. Please remember that you have training help-outs available. So as you're working through, whether it's the setup, the training, or the advanced setup classes, you can always get additional help one-on-one by signing up for those help-outs. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and please enjoy the rest of your day.